Hello everybody and welcome to an ESO build video. Today we're going to be taking a look at what is probably my favorite class role combo in the entire game, the Warden Tank. Now, just a couple things I want to go over before I go diving into this. One of which is that this build is actually super easy for a new player to get into. It's designed from the ground up to be ridiculously tanky even when you miss a block. The resource management is ridiculously easy on this Warden, comparatively speaking to some others that might struggle with it a little bit. That and all the gear is acquired through very easy means. One is a crafted set and one is an overland set. The other monster set is acquired from a fairly easy dungeon and is easily replaceable. So, everything is pretty good there. Second thing that I would like to get across real quick is that this build is kind of designed for 4-man content at its heart. It can do trials. I'm not saying it can't, but it most certainly is better suited for 4-man stuff. It doesn't run really any large-scale buffs. It's more meant for small-scale play. So if you'd like to adapt it to trials, I might recommend swapping an Eben or running Lord Warden. You know, just the classic buff sets that you might want to run. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's get into it. So first thing I'd like to go over is just the character sheet so you guys can see the raw and buff stats. Not too much here to see other than you can tell we're a health warden. Magic recovery is high, stamina recovery is decent. Resistances buff up to 30k whenever you're actually buffed, so that's nice. For a Mundus stone, we are using the Atronak. Now, the main reason I use this, magic recovery, obviously. Magic recovery is awesome, so if you can deal without this, great. You can pick something up like the Lady to get up to the capped resistances. You could run, I believe it is called the Lord for the extra health. If you really want to pump out more health, you could run for more resources. If you don't need the extra recovery, go for something else. I personally like the recovery. We are stage 3 vampire. Why stage 3 over stage 4? There's just no reason to run stage 4 really. If you want to, great. If you don't want to, don't worry about it. The only difference is you take 5% more damage from fire as a stage 4, and you no longer have the crouch speed penalty. It's the only difference, so take it or leave it at your will. We are using tri-stat food, specifically the longfin pasty with melon sauce. It's a substantial buff to your resource pools, and a massive buff to health. It's about the best food I could find for this build. I have considered running max health recovery foods, but they just did not quite net the same results. Honestly, I like having the higher max stats more than I like the recovery, so. Again, it's a bit of a personal choice, but I highly recommend making sure you pick a food that gives max health buff. Alright, so for what I believe would be what everyone has come here for, let's go over the gear. So one thing I'd like to just go over before I go through the gear here. The traits are meant to be 3 infused on your big pieces with prismatic enchants. And you want 4 sturdy on your small pieces with healthy enchants. That's not exactly what I have here, but it is the ideal trait combo that I would like. I just haven't had the chance to get that combo yet. Also, we are running 1 protective ring. Just to keep that in mind, that's how we get our resistances as high as we do. It's the only other trait that's really relevant here. So, for our first set, we are running Malubeth the Scourger. Now, why this set over any other set? Specifically because in the harder dungeon content that is out now, there are defiles everywhere. Your healing is getting so obliterated. This set helps plow through that. It really is a nice comeback tool. It's not necessary. It really isn't. Honestly, wardens are innately they have a lot of healing to work with. It's a ton. So, if you would decide that this is a bit too much of a selfish set for you and you like to run something else, Bloodspawn for alt gen is really nice. Lord Warden works great. That being said, if you would like to run a set that grants resistances, I would highly recommend losing the protective ring and switching out for a healthy. Just because that way you don't go over cap. Because there's nothing in this game that really debuffs your armor. So, both are in heavy. We are in 7 heavy. So, alright, for the second set, we are running Plague Doctor. This is kind of like your staple set for any health tank in the game. The best alternative to this, where you decide to run a more group utility set, would be Eben. It gives you a little less health, I think 2,000 to 3,000 less health, but it buffs your party's health by 1,800 or something along those lines. So, Plague Doctor or Eben, pick one for this slot, but you definitely want a set that gives you a lot of max health with this build. Alright, and for our final set, and arguably what is the most important and probably the most versatile set in the game, we are running Turog's Pact. Now, Turog's Pact, the real reason we run this is because it makes our enchantments just over, balls to the walls crazy. They're super powerful. It also is what makes this the most versatile build in the game for tanking, really. You could run a Crusher enchant your front bar if you want to buff the party's damage. You could run a Hardening if you need more defense. You could run a Restore Mana if you're having issues with Sustain. It's really, really versatile, and just to kind of prove my point, as you can see, I have multiple Turog's packed one-handers in this inventory here, and I swapped them out with different enchantments on them. They were not intentionally made for this originally, I just had other builds that used them, but like I said, Restore Mana, Restore Stamina, I've got a Hardening on one of these. I just kind of throw random enchants on them and see what works, though Crusher is my personal favorite so far. For your back bar, you do need to run a Frost Staff, and specifically, it must be an Absorb Stamina enchant. There is no negotiating on this one. You have to have that. It has to be infused. You can, if you choose to ditch Turog's Pact, which some people might, I would highly recommend trying Akaviri Dragon Guard. It is a great alternative. You will get slightly weaker enchantments, but your ultimates are nearly spammable with that set. So take it or leave what you prefer. I prefer Turog's, but like I said, Akaviri Dragon Guard is a great alternative. Alright, on to the skills. So, there we go. First skills first, Pierce Armor. Now, I'm pretty sure everyone who tanks knows what this is, but in case you don't, what you do with this is you walk up and you stab an opponent with this, and for the next 15 seconds they are aggroed onto you, meaning they will not attack anyone else unless the mechanic specifies otherwise. It also put a nice little resistance debuff on them. You do have to hit this a little more than every 12 seconds to keep that up, so I'd highly recommend doing so. Basically, your big thing with this, find the big targets, the ones that hit the hardest, make sure you poke them with this, and they won't attack your squishies. Lotus Blossom. Now, I highly consider this a flex slot, but you do need to have one green balance skill on your bar somewhere. Doesn't matter which of these two. You could have both, you could only have one, doesn't matter. Just make sure you have at least one of them. But Lotus Blossom turns your light attacks into a heal and your heavy attacks into a much even bigger heal. Now, the beauty of this is that it can also heal allies. This turns you into an off healer. It's a very handy skill, and the critical buffs our next heal on the list. Polar Wind. Now, what you're going to use Polar Wind for, this is your burst heal. As you can see, it does cost quite a pretty penny too, so you don't want to spam this. But it's a big heal. This is pretty much anywhere between 10 and 20,000 depending on crit, and that's before buffs. When you have Major Mending procced and when you have Major Vitality up, it's a big heal. I've easily hit this for 28,000. Big heal. Like I said, you don't need to spam this. It does actually put a little bit of passive healing on you after you cast it as well, and nicely, it heals a nearby ally. So this is a lifesaver. It's basically a breath of life for a nearby ally. Alright, so the other flex slot we have here is Leeching Vines. Leeching Vines, the main reason I run this is it is such a reliable means to proc the green balance passives. It's way more so than this one. And green balance passives overall are a source of major mending, it's a source of free resource return, and it's a source of minor toughness. So you really want to make sure your green balance is always up. You have to have one of these skills, but Leeching Vines is more reliable. Alright, so for our primary resource return on the mana side of things, we are using the Blue Betty. Now, there's one thing important to note with this skill, is one, every time you summon it, thanks to passives, you get some ultimate, you get some healing, you get, I think that's about it, and you get a little recovery bonuses. It also will purge one negative effect from you, such as a bleed, a slow, a defile. Very, very useful. The other important thing to note here is I am using the Tri-Stat, or the Tri-Focus passive and Destruction Staff skill line. That is why I'm using Blue Betty. It helps sustain my mana when I'm blocking on that back bar. If you don't want to do that passive, and I will show you the passive I'm talking about here in a second, I would highly recommend switching to Bull Netch, the one that restores stamina, because you're going to be using your stamina a lot more. Like I said, me personally, I block with mana on my back bar, stamina on my front bar, so I use Blue Betty. If I was going to block with stamina on both, I'd switch this over to Bull Netch. Alright, for ultimates, this is what I lovingly refer to as my oh shit button. Now, why would I do that? It's cheap, it's powerful, and it restores a chunk of its cost back if you hit someone low health, i.e. yourself and others. In a trial situation, if you hit more than a few people with this, i.e. if you hit at least 5 people who are under 50% health, you gain more ultimate than you use to cast the skill. It is fantastic. It really is. It's cheap, and like I said, you could spam it. I don't usually spam it much, but like if you need it, it's great. It also, again, reliably procs all your green balance passives, so it's useful ultimate. I highly recommend using it. Were you to replace this, I would use the Sword and Board ultimate, as that is pretty much another fairly spammable defensive ultimate. Alright, for our back bar, we are running Ice Fortress as our armor skill. Now, the beauty of this skill is, one, it buffs every ally around you as well, so they don't need to slot a resistance buff because you're doing it for them. Secondly, it gives, and this only applies to you, minor protection. Now, the minor protection is great. 8% damage reduction is nothing to laugh at. It definitely helps, especially since we're not at capped resistances. I'm trying to think, is there anything else relevant to this skill? Besides that, passively, thanks to some of the passives, you do get a little higher resistances, which are nice, but Ice Fortress is just better than the alternative skills that you could use for this, though. It lasts longer, it gives the buff to allies, it gives you minor protection. It's really, there's no reason to run the alternative skills for this. Alright, so what I consider the bread and butter of our sustain for this build, much like our Blue Betty is our magic sustain, this is ironically our stamina sustain tool here. Why? Because thanks to our Turok's Pact infused stamina glyph on our back bar, this will proc our stamina glyph every 2 seconds. Every second tick of damage, you get about 600 stamina back. It is very important to keep Blockade of Frost up at all times on something. It doesn't matter what. You could have it up on the boss. You could have it up on an enemy like so. As you can see there, that second tick of damage, every time there's a second tick on there instead of just the 600, that's the glyph proccing. So that tells you that there is a nice little stamina incoming. Helps you block in your front bar, and you keep this up for your back bars blocking. Just watch your resources. Seriously, if you're blocking with both resources, you gotta watch it. All your healing comes out of your mana pools. You don't want to burn that. Next skill over, I believe. We have Gripping Shards. Now, this skill is, honestly, it's pretty awesome. This is a handy little skill, and it is every time something is near you, no matter, so long as it's not, or so long as it is a CCable opponent, they will be immobilized in this little spike field. They can't move. Some things will slip through. I think you can only max CC 6 targets with this. If anything that does not get CC'd will get slowed on top of this, though. So, it's a good skill. It's great for crowd control. Your main objective when pulling ad waves is to taunt the big targets, pull the little targets, or pull the range targets, and use this to immobilize all of them so you don't have to taunt everything. Alright, now on to the pull, ironically enough. Frozen Device. Frozen Device is awesome. So what it does is you put these little runes down. They will last for 36, 40 seconds, something along those lines. And anything that steps over them that is a CCable opponent will be teleported to you instantly. So, let me find a opponent to test this on here, and I'll show you. Put that under his feet, and boop, here he comes. Same thing with the next one. And that is your version of the Dragonite's Chains. It is such a good skill. The other handy thing about it is that unlike Chains, which gets caught on targets, this ability does not. You can throw this right through a target. Now, that's a wall, so that doesn't count. But were I to find another opponent, I don't see one up right now, so I'm not going to worry about it. But if there's something in your way, you can cast this right through a target. It's very handy, so you don't have to worry about getting stuck on the boss in front of you. You can still pull all the ads behind him. Bone Shield. Bone Shield is fantastic. This is basically your stamina heal, technically speaking. So what you're looking to do with this is you pop it, and unfortunately, due to a dark UI bug, you can't really see my health bar, but I've been given a 15k plus shield. That shield inherits all my resistances, by the way. So, when you have that shield up, that is a lot of damage reduction. That's like I said, it's a 15k heal for stamina, basically, so long as you preemptively cast this ability. On top of that, though, your allies can actually walk up and take this shield as well. And when they do so, they get 50% of their health bar and major vitality added to themselves and 3 other allies nearby. So, it's actually a great tool for party mitigation in general, especially if you have a melee DPS proccing it all the time for the party. Either way, even if you don't have people around, like I said, great mitigation tool. I would personally recommend using this when you're on your back bar and you need a heal. Just do this first and then swap over and heal. It gives you nice little window, especially when you gotta drop block. Now for ultimate, my favorite ultimate in the game is Permafrost. Firstly, it slows everything it touches to a crawl. Like, it's pitiful watching their movement rate through this. Secondly, after 3 ticks of damage, it will stun them. So you can use this to A, stun up a massive ad pool. B, break some boss mechanics, because there are some CCable bosses in the game that you can stun them out of mechanics. And thirdly, it gives major protection to myself and every nearby ally in a radius of 10 meters for the 8-second duration. A shit ton of damage mitigation. A ton. So what I would use this for is I'd often cast this during like the last boss in Bloodroot Forge, during the phase when he's stomping and knocking all the ceiling down. I'd cast this during some of the White Gold Tower bosses. Any boss that's really going to hurt you, you can pop this and it will save your life. It's ridiculous. A couple alternative skills I just want to go over here. Quite often and really frequently, I find myself running Absorb Magic, usually in the place of one of these 2 skills. And the reason why you would run Absorb Magic is because it is a stamina heal. It is the same heal as Polar Wind, except it must be procced off a spell projectile, meaning you need a mage attacking you to get this to work. But it'll absorb that projectile and heal you for 17% of your maximum health. It also passively buffs your block in both cost reduction and damage mitigation. Nice, like I said, nice skill to have. It's cheap. That's the one bonus of it. Super cheap. Certain bosses, such as the Maw of Lorkhaj last boss, or Lord Warden, or really, actually, Fanglayer's last boss too, is a good example of someone who's always pelting you with projectiles. This ability will save your life. It's super cheap, and it's really powerful. Another good alternative. Let me go over here and find it real quick here. Deceptive Predator. Now, I don't run this often. It's really hard. Occasionally, I do run this, though, and I will usually throw it here. Whenever I do so, it's because it's a boss that there is no ground CCable adds in it, and I need the speed buff to get around to taunt things. Again, Fanglayer's boss would come to mind. I have used this in Moonhunter Keep, though I found it was not as efficient. It's really a situational thing. You got to kind of learn to use it when you need it. Any other skills that I'm missing here? Let me go through here. Shimmering Shield. Yes, I knew I was missing something. Alright, so Shimmering Shield is kind of like your Absorb Magic, but different. Instead of healing you, it absorbs all projectiles, so you don't have to worry about spellcasters. Archers count too. But also, the beauty of this ability is that it restores a chunk of its cost back, about half when it's absorbed all 3 projectiles it can, and it gives you a ton of ultimate generation. It's awesome. You can really spam ultimates if you can keep this up a lot. Alright, Sword and Shield, there's another one here. Heroic Slash. Now, I don't find myself needing this much, especially since Frost can put minor maim on people, I do believe. That being said, this ability is really nice for, again, the ult gen. You can stack this with Shimmering, by the way. They're 2 separate buffs, so you can actually keep spamming ultimates with those 2 comboed together. It's ridiculous. But if I were to run this skill, it would unfortunately have to replace Absorb Magic. Or if it replaced this would have to go on the back bar somewhere. So this would have to take that place, or Leeching would have to take the place. If you were going to cram this on your bar, you have to make sure you don't lose out on a green balance skill somewhere. That's the only thing I'm going to say. Alright, Destruction Staff. You don't need this very often, but occasionally it is nice to slot Crushing Shock. The few fights I find that this is actually slottable, you can often replace this. You don't need this pull for many boss fights, so you can throw Crushing on there for an extra. Fanglayer's boss, Hellroth Citadel. I'm trying to think if there's any other good ones. Pretty much any boss that has guys who can channel attacks, this is your way of stopping it. Now, normally your DPS or a healer will slot this, but more people doing it, the better. Trust me, it really helps when you can get everyone working towards the same goal. Another skill I used once, but honestly I would never use this on a normal circumstance, is Elemental Drain. Now, the only reason I did use this was because my healer was not providing it that game, because we kind of had some really bad healers for some reason in that trial. But normally your healer should provide this buff for you. That being said, if he's not, you can run this. It's nice. It really does help, especially since I'm blocking with my mana pool. Oh, that does remind me. The Tri-Focus passive. The only thing this does is makes it where you block with your mana on your back bar. Your Frost heavy attack can taunt, so this is why I don't run my normal range taunt. And it gives you a small damage shield whenever you heavy attack. It's very handy. You don't have to run this, though. You can just slot the range taunt if you want. If you don't want to run this, you'll only block with stamina, which is far, far easier to learn. And like I said, just switch out for the Bull Netch instead of the Blue Betty to sustain it. Alright. Armor. We are in 7 heavy, so you don't need any of the passives from light or medium, but make sure you get all your heavy armor passives. Very handy. World. We are a vampire. Now, Elusive Mist is actually quite handy. I'm not going to lie. I haven't used it much, but when I did, it was actually pretty damn handy. This will cut all snares off of you. This will get you out of any immobilizes, and it gives you a nice little speed buff to work with. The downside of it is you lose all your magic regen and you lose all your healing while you're in this. So you can't stay in it long. It also gives you massive damage reduction, so if you're having issues blocking or you need to move quickly while getting damage mitigation, this is your option. For passives, the main things you need are Supernatural Recovery and Undeath. These are the only 2 passives you need to play a vampire, but if you're not taking these passives, then you shouldn't be a vampire. There's really no point of being one without these 2 passives. Undeath, especially with our massive health pool, is humongous mitigation. It's ridiculous. Supernatural Recovery is just kind of handy. It's not necessary, but it is helpful. If you are going to be a stage 4 vampire, Darkstalker can be handy, but there's really only one boss in the entire game that happens to be in March of Sacrifices that this could even remotely come in handy. So, well, I usually am stage 3 because there's just no point. Unnatural Resistances, all this does is help reduce the issues of health recovery that vampires have. It won't fix it, but it'll definitely help reduce it. Another skill worth mentioning is Drain Essence. I don't personally use this skill because I haven't found a need for it, but it is a lot of healing, and if you were wanting to use it, this is basically this heal on crack. It's ridiculous if you would choose to run this, and I'm going to actually start testing it out soon and see what I think of it. Like I said, I don't personally run it, but there is an ultimate generation version of this skill that generates you 5 ultimate per second as well for some crazy ult gen. So if you'd like to try this, give it a go. I would personally slot it in one of these 2 slots, or I'd slot it here. But figure out where you'd like to put it. That's what I'd use. 3 and 4, and 2 and 4 are your options for 3 slots pretty much to work with. 1, 2, and 5, and 1, 3, and 5 are necessary. You cannot get rid of those skills. Guilds. Fighters Guild, the only thing worth mentioning here is Banish the Wicked. It gives you a little bit of ultimate gen whenever you kill a undead, Daedra, or werewolf. It doesn't happen frequently, but any alt gen is good alt gen. Psijic. Now, I do occasionally run Deep Thoughts, though it's very rare and honestly usually unneeded. We have so much sustain with this character already, you just don't need it. If you'd like to run it, though, you can slot it in like this slot, you know, same flex slots that you normally have. Just, if you choose to run this, make sure you take these last couple passives here. This one, you get a damage shield whenever you block with the bar that shield is on. That's why I kind of like to put it on my back bar if able to. And Deliberation. Anytime you're channeling said skill, you get major protection. So, it's kind of like a pseudo block. Maybe like a third of the mitigation, half mitigation a block. But you definitely want these 2 if you're going to slot that skill. Undaunted. The big things to note here is Inner Rage along with Bone Shield. I do run Inner Rage occasionally, even though I taunt with my heavy attacks for my Frost Staff. Just because the Frost Staff is a long channel, this is an instant cast, so like Cloud Rest, where you can't afford a mistake, I would recommend running this, even though you can taunt with your Frost Staff. Blood Altar, I don't use this skill at all, but I have seen some tanks do so with brutal efficiency. The main reason I don't use it is because I use Leeching Vines, and I rely on my healers for healing the group. I'm not responsible for everyone in the group, obviously. Take both passives. They're very good. 2% extra in all resources, and a lot of resource return whenever you take a synergy. So it's actually a pretty chunky heal, to be honest. It's pretty nice. Alliance War. I don't really use anything in here much, but Aggressive Warhorn is kind of like your staple tank ultimate. If you'd like to run it for your group, go right ahead. I would personally replace Permafrost with this if you're going to use it, though. I would not give up Enchanted Forest. I think that's too much of a clutch ultimate whenever you might need some extra healing, that I would not give up Enchanted Forest. Vigor. I actually have run this before. This was the same time when I said I had a really, really bad healer that was not doing much and was not giving me orbs or any way of resource return. Occasionally I will throw this on the back bar just so I have a powerful heal to work with. It's not the greatest, but it is actually a decent little bit of healing over time, especially with the amount of healing we do have. So, It helps. It's not great, but it is a stamina heal, so. Support. I don't run barrier. You can. It's nice, but it's something I think a healer would run more than you. It really just doesn't feel like it's necessary. But if you do, you can get extra mana recovery for having it slotted, so it's helpful there. Same thing with Purge. I don't really run this much, though in Halls of Fabrication it's kind of a must. There are some dungeons where this is helpful. But most dungeons where you would need a Purge, either your healer is going to purify you, because it's a small-scale dungeon, you're not worried about a large group of people. Or thanks to our Blue Betty, we can purge it ourselves for free. So keep that in mind. Purge is an expensive as hell ability. Even when you get Efficient Purge, it's still like 6,000. So I don't run this ability much, but sometimes you do need to have it. For race, we are a Nord. Now, you don't have to be a Nord, but I highly recommend either Nords, Imperials, or Argonians for this build. You want as much max health as you can cram in, and those are the 3 highest health races in the game. Now, if you want to go push your max stats as high as possible, go Imperial. If you want a race you can play without paying for the Imperial race, go Nord. And if you really want the resource return from Argonians, they are kind of like easy mode tanking, go Argonians. They're really good. They are probably the best race for tanking in the game overall. Though I do prefer Nords and Imperials just due to personal preference. For crafting, the only skill or only important thing in here is that you need medicinal use. Why? This buffs your crafted potions so they last 30% longer. That pushes it so their duration is slightly longer than the potion cooldown in this game. So you can keep the buff they give you up at all times if you need to. I don't normally have to, but when I do, it's really handy to have. Alright, I think that's everything in the skills other than passives. Now, I'm just going to skim the passives a little bit here because, honestly, most people know them. If you don't, I highly recommend taking a good look at your class passives. They are really good, and sometimes there's some fantastic gems hidden in them. But just the big ones you need to be made aware of is 1, Ultimate Gen every time you cast your Betty once every 8 seconds. So every time you go back to your front bar, I usually make a habit of recasting the Betty. This will also heal you every time your Betty is unsummoned, i.e. when you recast it. So, again, heal, ult gen, and extra recovery just for having it slotted. Some nice skills in here. This passive is kind of worthless. Accelerated growth. Every time your green balance skill heals yourself or an ally under 40% health, you gain major immunity for 3 seconds. Like I said, there are some really nice gems in Warden passives. Massive resource return from this. Every second you're healing an ally, you gain back mana or stamina, whichever you need more of. This is fantastic. This is why you need to have a green balance skill. You don't have a choice. You have to have it. It's basically your version of the DK alt regen. It's a lot of return. This just increases your healing done by a little bit. It's usually 4% on my front bar, if not 6, depending on my green balance skill count. And maturation. This gives you minor toughness to both yourself and allies that you heal, including overhealing, by the way. So you can cast a big AoE heal right before a fight, and you'll give everyone 10% more health. It's kind of why I don't run Eben, because you're already providing that buff to the party. That and I off tank often in the few vet trials I've run, and the main tank was running the Eben, so there is that. This does count for any heal. It does not need to be a green balance heal, but still, you want green balance for Nature's Gift. Winter's Embrace. There's only a couple things worth noting in here. 1, more chances to apply chilled status effect. Fantastic. More resistances, specifically on our back bar, where we have 3 frost skills, if not 4 at sometimes. Because normally I'd be running this combo. So you'd have 4 frost skills for 2,000 extra resistances on your back bar. That doesn't quite line up with shield resistances, but it's like within 200 resistance. You're still over 30k on your back bar. And reduce the effectiveness of snares applied to you. I don't know how well that affects bosses, but it might help, it might not. I personally have not done any tests to tell you if this actually does what it says it does in PvE circumstances. For Sword and Board, pretty much take everything. In some way or another, this will buff your blocking, bashing, movement speed while blocking. They all do something very good. Get them all. Destruction Staff. Destruction Expert, nice. Ancient Knowledge is mandatory, especially with a Frost Staff. Elemental Force is definitely nice. More chances to apply the chilled status effect. Again, more chances of minor main. Penetration magic is useless to you. It's spell pen. You don't need this. Try focus. As I said, run this if you want to block with mana on your back bar. If you don't want to, don't run this. Armor, as I already I pretty much went over all the passives below this point, so I'm not going to worry about them. But as I said, heavy armor and undaunted are really the only armor passives you need. Alright, so that is everything involving the skills, gear. Let's move on to the champion points. Now, one thing I want to get into before I go in here. One, I'm not CP capped, so these are not the cap champion points. And secondly, I'm still kind of experimenting with them. So I will post an update of these if I find a better combination. But right now, we are running 37 into Warlord, break free cost. Sprinter, you don't need this often, but it is handy when you do. We are running now 11 into Arcanist and 43 into Tenacity. The Tenacity is the important one of these two. You want to make sure your heavy attacks give you a nice little chunk of resources back. After that, start dumping extra into Arcanist. 66 Tumbling and 81 Shadow Ward. Now, the Shadow Ward I kind of had already been doing, but a friend clued me in on just how good the Tumbling was, and ever since I've done it, I can't go back. The roll dodge is just so damn good. 100 into Blessed, 100 into Elfborn, and I've been dumping the rest into Precise Strikes to just really buff up our healing. We're not running anything fancy on this build, unlike some other tank builds that might run Leeching or things like that. So there's just no reason for me to dump CP anywhere else, really. Alright, so this is kind of your all-around CP, but I would recommend changing this if you're in a vet trial to the actual trial. But for your all-around circumstances, 66 Ironclad will work fine, 66 into Thick Skin, 43 into Hardy, 32 into Elemental Defender, 32 into Heavy Armor Focus, and dump the extra into Quick Recovery. Now, why 32 into Heavy Armor Focus? This is because Turog's Pact gives us extra spell resistance. But it does not give us physical resistance. So this helps buff, it helps fix that. Because right now, our heavy armor would be a lot lower by a little over, or nearly 3k resistance less. So this fixes that issue. If you're not running Turog's Pact and you have no other source of spell resistance, you may have to split this up with Spell Shield. In which case, you probably only have about 29,000 resistances instead of 30, barring you using an actual, like, Lord Warden set. Alright, but that is everything with the CP as well, so I think we are good on this. I think I've shown you guys pretty much everything. Yeah, so, anyways, guys, if you have any concerns, questions, or just want to talk about it, let me know in the comment section down below, and I will gladly answer any questions you guys have. There'll also be a link to a Discord server if you guys want a more immediate response from me, because I check that thing pretty damn often, so, or want to get in contact with me about other stuff. Any other closing notes besides that? Nope, not really. But yeah, I will be back on the next one, guys. I will probably be detailing a PvP build. I'm not really sure yet, so I'm not going to go over any more plans with that. But anyways, guys, have a good one, and I will catch you on the next one. Later, people.